so that we get started on time, let's go ahead and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would bow your heads for invocation. Heavenly Father, we are grateful tonight to live in a free country where we can assemble. Lord, we ask that you would give us wisdom in doing the business of our town. Help us to do what's best for the citizens of Hickory Creek. Father, I pray for the soldiers around the world, the men and women who serve to protect us. Pray that you would keep them out of harm's way and bring them home safely to their families. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, as I said, Councilman Kenny's on his way, and the mayor should join us later. Do you have a proclamation to read? Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed the Nebraska Board of Agriculture to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, John M. Smith, Mayor of the City of Hickory Creek, Texas, do hereby proclaim October 27th, 2012 as Arbor Day in the City of Hickory Creek, Texas, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Dated this 27th day of October, 2012. All right, so next up is announcements. Anybody have any announcements?
Just a reminder, we have a garage sale at Public Works on the 2nd, 3rd of November. We've got some prizes we're raffling off. Probably see posters out on the information desk and see some articles in the newsletter in the local newspaper. We appreciate it. If everybody drops by, I'm sure we'll have something you're going to need. And also wanted to announce that the Hickory Creek Animal Shelter is being invited to the Dallas Pet Expo, which is huge. It's going to have people from all over North Texas and even further. There's going to be a lot of animals up for adoption and a lot of neat things going on. I guess the crew's planning on doing microchipping. Take some of our animals down for adoption. It's quite an honor to get invited to that.
And then Christy, when is our tree lighting?
December 7th.
December 7th, we'll have our annual Christmas tree lighting here at Town Hall. The last few years, it's been a very popular event. Be outdoors.
This year, we are not doing the chili cook-off though.
Okay. So, everybody come. Okay, public comment. This item allows the public the opportunity to address the town council to comply with the provisions of the Open Meeting Act. Town council cannot discuss items or take action on items brought before them not posted on the agenda. Comments regarding an item on the agenda may be made at this time or during the agenda time. Anybody have anyone wish to speak tonight? Okay, then we'll move on to a public hearing, and I will open the public hearing at 6:36 to hear public opinion regarding levying assessments against property. I'm having struggle reading as it's tiny. To hear public opinion regarding levying assessments against property within Hickory Creek Improvement District Number 2 on approximately 111.424 contiguous acres located within the corporate limits of the town of Hickory Creek. Said property is more particularly described as follows: MEP and PRR Company Survey, abstract number 915, Denton County, Texas, to pay for improvements that confer a special benefit on the property. So the public hearing is open. Does anybody wish to speak on this agenda item?
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, Lance and Christie. This is the last, my name is Ike Shue, 500 Main Street, Suite 800, Fort Worth, Texas. I feel like once this pit is finished, Christie and I talk to each other, trade emails, have for about the last 6 months. This is the end of the PID 2 activities whereby you've already created the district. And I represent the property owner, the CTMGT entity. And you are completing that process tonight. You are levying an assessment which will be allocated as among the 131 lots. And on behalf of the owner, obviously, we are in favor of the district. We are in favor of the levy of the assessments. And we believe that the amount of those assessments is less than the increased value. In other words, the benefit, the special benefit conferred is greater than the amount of the assessments. And you are also approving a reimbursement agreement that pay us back with a revenue stream over time. We would urge you to levy the assessments and approve the reimbursement agreement for execution. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
If we'll need to hold the questions for when we're on that agenda item, we'll just do the public hearing at this point. Thank you, Mr. Shue. All right, anybody else want to speak on this in the public hearing? Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 6:39. So moving on to the consent agenda items. Council, you can have a minute to look through those and see if you have any questions or comments. I'll entertain a motion when you're ready.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to move to accept consent agenda items C1 through 5 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Councilman Gordon has made the motion.
Second.
Councilman Dupree seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we'll move on to item D1. Consider an act on an ordinance of the town of Hickory Creek, Texas related to the Hickory Creek Public Improvements District Number 2, ratifying and confirming certain actions, approving a final service and assessment plan, approving and directing the execution of a reimbursement agreement, levying assessments, providing for the accrual of interest and the payment of assessments, providing for the prepayment of assessments, creating liens, providing penalties for delinquent assessments, creating a project fund, making legislative findings, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. So council, you have the final information as Mr. Shoup has mentioned. Any questions or comments, discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem, if I could ask Ike a question.
Certainly.
Ike, you had made some changes to Section 8 regarding the timing of the when interest accrues and when payments are due. At least, what was the reason behind that?
Let's contrast. On PID 1, there was essentially a grace period built in where if the owner of the lot wasn't building for up to 4 years, the interest didn't start to accrue and they didn't start to collect them. The business deal, Lance, on this one is simply different. Interest doesn't accrue and no collection begins until all the improvements are finished. But the demand is such that the developer wants to go ahead and start the accrual of interest and the collection. So as soon as these are final platted and those are approved by the city, then interest accrues. And then the first annual installment becomes due the first January 31st to occur after that. So I think it was just a business decision that you did not need the grace period. So interest starts sooner and the annual assessments will begin collecting, so that means if a builder is sitting on it, they pay the annual installment. Just a business, difference in business.
Could you kind of explain the mechanics, I guess, of the reimbursement agreement? Or, how that's
Sure.
going to work?
But part of what you have, where you levy an assessment, and in this ordinance, you agree that you're going to pay me, and there is a contract that embodies that agreement to pay that's authorized by state law. And in that agreement, you take the amount of the assessment, and you promise to pay it back to me over time at an interest rate, which is regulated by state law. We hope that as the property builds out at the interest rates that are in a reimbursement agreement, that eventually we would come back and ask your permission, or actually ask you to issue bonds to essentially just think of it as paying off the reimbursement agreement. But you have no obligation to do that. So the reimbursement agreement is authorized by the statute, and it is the contract which implements what you have in the assessment ordinance, which is a promise to pay me over time from those annual installments that you collect. I might also mention, when you look, the service and assessment plan is kind of a guiding document, and there are 5 elements there. There's a principal and interest, but there's no cost to the city in administering this. If you look, there's a table in there where there's a column for collection costs. For example, the first year, there's almost $34,000 in there for collection costs and admin costs. And those are adjustable year to year. So the intent is that as you collect principal and interest and pay me back, that none of the collection costs or delinquent charges or admin costs of administering that PID fall back on the city or its taxpayers.
And let me interject for the record that Councilman Kenny has joined us. Lance, you have further questions?
No, that's it.
Okay. Council, any other? So Lance, are you satisfied with everything that's,
Yes.
council? Other questions or comments?
Just for clarification, you said pay you overtime or overtime?
Think of the reimbursement agreement as a promissory note. It is a promise to pay over a period of time.
Good.
And again, when you look at the structure of it and the interest rates, it's all regulated by the statute. You get the
It's paid
question?
salary, not hourly.
I was just looking confused.
And I guess take an opportunity to thank the city staff, particularly Christie, because it has gone remarkably well, and she's available and responsive and worked well together. I'm sure I appreciate that assistance all.
She does a great job for us.
Yes, he does.
Okay, council, comments, questions, discussion?
Just finish it, we'll start.
Mr. Shute, do you have any idea when they'll get, once we get this approved, where we are in the process of how soon we'll see something happening now?
I don't have a start date, but the best evidence that it's quick is we're going to start paying assessments on the land. So I do not have a start date. Apparently, you have a very good single-family market here. And they're anxious to get the lots on the ground, but I don't know what that schedule is.
Okay.
A little piece on that, I did get some information that they are supposed to get the final agreement in Lake City's hands with water and sewer, so they're supposed to be starting water and sewer by the end of this month.
Great. All right, so all of our work is going to pay off. So council, ready, anybody want to make a motion on this? Ready to act or more discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll be happy to make a motion. Move to accept an ordinance of the town of Hickory Creek, Texas related to Hickory Creek Public Improvement District Number 2 as discussed.
Okay. Councilman Gordon has made a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Councilman Kenny seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shute.
Thank you.
Okay, consider an act on an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Hickory Creek, Texas, authorizing and allowing under the act governing the Texas Municipal Retirement System updated service credits in said system on an annual basis for service performed by qualifying members of such system who at the effective date of allowance are members of the Town of Hickory Creek, providing for increased prior and credit service annuities for retirees and beneficiaries of deceased retirees of the town, providing for increased municipal contributions to the current service annuity reserve at retirement of the employee of the town, and establishing an effective date for the ordinance. Chris, do you want to?
Yes, this is the TMRS fees for the 2-to-1 that we discussed during budget, and the council had said that we were amendable and we would be moving forward. This is just a formality to pass an ordinance, and it will begin in January. TMRS runs calendar year, whereas we run fiscal year, so October 1. So this will begin January 1st.
Okay.
And this will have our match, will go from 1.5 to 1 to 2 to 1.
So this has all been budgeted. This is nothing. This is just kind of a formality to establish this and put it into place. So, any discussion on this item?
This is basically what we covered when we went over the meeting or two ago.
And so this was built into the 2012-13 budget. Any other discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion. We approve on the ordinance of, excuse me, real quick here, I'm on D2. Yeah. Approved ordinance of the Town of Hickory Creek, Texas, authorizing and allowing, hold on here, I'm not in the right spot. I'm going to
Does he need to read all of that?
Just, you can just cite the agenda item number.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to move that we approve agenda item D2 as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That was Councilman Kenny that made the motion, Councilman Dupree that added the second. Okay, D3, consider an act on an ordinance amending the 2011-2012 fiscal year budget. And this is just simply our year-end.
Right, this is our year-end budget. As you see, I make notes on for so that we can see pretty much so that I will match what Carl comes in at. You can see that we should increase our fund balance reserve by approximately, I think it was $64,000, almost $65,000. Once the bottom line showed $137,000, but we have to take out the restricted funds that we have for this year. So that's why I brought it down to $65,000. So when we have our audit, it should be fairly close to that.
I think that's great. I think that's really commendable for our staff. They've done a great job, and we can end up $65,000 to the good. Any discussion or comments?
We did it.
Great job.
All right.
Unreal in today's economy.
All right, I'll entertain a motion now.
I'll try it again. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to approve item number D3 as presented.
Okay. We have a motion made by Councilman Kenny. Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Second added by Councilman Gordon. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Item D4, consider an act on an ordinance of the Town of Hickory Creek, Texas, amending the town's Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, Animal Control, Article 2.04, Impoundment, Section 2.04.002, generally by omitting subsection H, Chapter 2, Animal Control, Article 2.04, Impoundment, Section 2.04.004, Adoption of Dogs and Cats. Chapter 2, Animal Control, Article 2.05, Rabies Control, Section 2.05.007, Report of Animal Exposed to Rabies. Okay, discussion?
Basically what this is we're going through all of, or we went through all of them, not going through, we already did. Instead of bringing one back every month for the next 4 months, we decided to do it all at once, and this is the only other one that was in there. And basically what this is changing, in the ordinance, what it states currently, that if we get a dog that comes in with tags on it, we are required by the ordinance to keep it for 6 days, okay? What that means, if we do that, we are gonna have a full shelter 24/7, because we've only got 2 isolation rooms, and we'll have to start moving dogs. We're supposed to be in ISO out on the floor, because those dogs aren't available until the 7th day. We do that currently. It's not like at the 7th day this dog's going to be euthanized, and we don't do euthanasia. It's still going to be kept. But basically, what we're trying to do is move it back down to the 72 hours to make it to where that dog will become adoptable. It's our property in the 72 hours, then we can adopt it out the next day. Otherwise, we got to keep it till the 7th day, and upon that 7th day, then that's when that dog will be adopted out. There's no way that we can keep them and run our system the way it's supposed to be ran properly with keeping dogs in ISO for 7 days. So that's one of the changes. And the other change is our ordinance, and I don't know how this got changed or when this took place, but bottom line, it has 96 hours in there towards we're holding the dog for 96 hours, and upon the 97th hour, that dog becomes our property to go up for adoption. We'd like to change that to bring it back down to the 72 hours. Once upon the 72 hour, the 73rd hour, it becomes the town's property and it can go up for adoption. That's basically what we've kind of been following, you know. I mean, we keep dogs inevitable almost now, you know. So basically those are just some changes to shorten the time where it becomes our property instead of having to wait the 6 days and the 96 hours. And that's pretty much standard. The 72 hours is pretty much a shelter standard, and I have never seen that 6 days in anybody's ordinance, because the whole time, you just don't have the capacity to do that, you know. I mean, we'll pick up 2 dogs, you know, a week, they got tags on them. If we had to hold them things for 6 days until, you know, became our property, you know, we don't, only backtrack, we don't adopt them out immediately, even if they got tags. We do our due diligence, scan them, call them, leave messages, all that, everything we possibly can, until, you know, we all ultimately decide, well, obviously the owner's not going to come get it, then they put it up for adoption at that time. And we've had the case to where we put them up for adoption for that 73rd hour the next day, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, the owner pops up, you know, come get the dog. You know, in the past, it has been a good turnout. The doctor understands and has brought the dog back. Hadn't been a big deal. You know, but there is always that chance. But where do you cut the line at? I mean, you go 6 days. 6 days might not be long enough. You go 15 days. You know, I mean, there's really no good answer of how long to keep them. But like I said, 72 hours is pretty much the industry standard.
Well, my concern is, I didn't find out about this until yesterday, and this has not been before the AWB. I'm getting phone calls, conflicting phone calls, and a lot of it is in and around the notion that you want to do away with Section H, which does include the 6 days. And I think the problem that I'm hearing from people is that, you know, when you're doing the identification, saying whether it has tags or not, it doesn't include microchipping, which is probably one of the bigger issues that's going on right now in terms of animals being microchipped. And the concern about people for instance, maybe being on a Caribbean cruise and you pick up a dog that's microchipped, once you track it down, you notify those people that 72 hours is up, the dog's ours.
Whenever a dog comes in a tag, just like today, we picked up 2 chihuahuas and tags on, okay? The vet tag had no vet number on it, had the ID number, and he was vaccinated in 2012, but no vet that issued the tag. Okay, so that's an oblivious tag, there's no way to track that down. It had an owner's tag on there. The address and the phone number went back to a Foley Beach address. She no longer lives in Foley Beach, she's been evicted 2 months ago. We got in contact with the landlord that lives right next door to him, okay? He called, whatever that little bar is, Kathy's Bar there in Lake Dallas, because apparently she hangs out there. Well, nobody's seen Jackie's. Nobody's seen her in there for 2 weeks, okay? So therefore, she made a phone call to somebody else. I mean, it can go on and on and on. And luckily at 4:30 this afternoon, this lady, somebody finally tracked her down, you know, and we made contact with her. You
I
know,
think that's the issue, you know.
well, that just goes back to like what I'm saying. You could keep this dog for 30 days and still not, they come back in from a Alaskan hunt or something. You know, I mean, where do you draw the line?
Well, I don't think 30 days would be an issue. I think the issue is it removes the 6-day fail-safe, and that's what makes people feel better knowing it's in the language.
I'll tell you right now, we didn't know that was in there. That 6 days has not been done since I've started here. That's been 10 years ago. So,
Well,
Are you sure about that?
positive.
That was one of the first,
No.
I'll speak whenever you're finished.
go ahead.
I remember when, one of my first 6 months on AWB, that was one of the biggest complaints, one of the biggest things that we looked at was the 72-hour rule and the opportunity, not that it was being done, but the opportunity to euthanize after 72 hours. And at that time, the discussion was, and I believe there was an agenda item that added the 6 days, that was something that was done about 5 years ago, according to the recollection of other AWB members. And so my opinion is that this was added about 5 years ago, that it used to be 72 hours, and that it was recommended that we move that out to 6 days, specifically for an example of a case where there was a family who had parked in the RV park over here, the state Hickory Creek Park. They lost their dog. They went to the city of Corinth because they thought it was the city of Corinth. Corinth told them to go to Denton. They went to Denton and they never found their dog. They drove home, and later Hickory Creek called and said, "Hey, we have your dog." If we wouldn't have, they were at this example, we were right on the 72 hours. We weren't, like you said, we don't euthanize very often. If it's not a violent, a vicious animal, a sick animal, we do our very best.
We don't.
Above and beyond to euthanize. But at that time, I think the fear was that 72 hours isn't long enough for a confused pet owner to sort out, have an opportunity to put out flyers to find where the animal might be. My concern, to be quite honest with you, and I might be wrong, but I think the 6 days was added about 5 years ago. Did any of you read item H? Let me read item H to you. It says, any animal except vicious or wild animals not reclaimed by the owner may humanely be euthanized after being impounded for 72 hours, except that any animal wearing a current registration shall be impounded for 6 days. So what that means is that if your dog gets out, doesn't have a tag on it, it can be euthanized after 72 hours. Doesn't mean that it will, doesn't mean that that'll happen.
So that's an incorrect statement.
Well, but our ordinance says that we do euthanize, so while we might not, if you're not director of animal control and we're not on council, they could be euthanized after 72 hours if we pass this, correct?
We're omitting this. We're trying to omit this.
That's right, so if you omit this, that gives us the 72-hour rule, not the 6-day rule.
I don't think it specifies euthanizing though. Does it
No.
say something, is there
No.
something else where it says?
No,
saying.
this is omitting this so that this is no longer in here from what I understand from KC.
Well, One, it would be, we weren't really presented exactly what you're removing, what you're adding. We were just being told you're removing, you want to omit item H. Item H says that after 72 hours, you can humanely euthanize. So I don't personally like that, and that's what I'm advocating against. If removing section H gives us the ability to euthanize after 72 hours, I'm opposed to that.
I think this is is this not protecting?
No, he's right, I mean, but look, but on the other hand, let me ask you this, what's the difference? It says nothing about microchipping, okay, so if I get a dog in there, that's 73 hours, if I hadn't contacted, I can euthanize that dog.
Euthanize even though it's microchipped.
So there's no,
Absolutely.
it's a no-win situation.
Well, what my point is,